Which mic can she use for introduction of the speakers?
You saw. Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Our first part of our science session. So it's looking at the shipping and technology for infrastructure and development. So we're talking about the green transition. And I just wanted to give an overview of what we can expect in this session. My name is Penny Wagner. I'm the head of the Norwegian Operational CI Service as part of the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. The office is based here in Tromsø, and so I'm actually coming from a very practical perspective. And so I actually found this topic to be very interesting for me. And I would actually like to have this session be quite informal. We have a few speakers who are going to have a short presentation, and they're going to be really kind of setting the stage for our panel discussion. And so when we actually have the panel discussion, I would like to let us just open the conversation to the audience if you have questions, but really have a good discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker who will open our session, and it's going to be Professor Asghar Sorensen at the Norwegian Science and Technology University. And he's a director of the Center for Autonomous Marine Operations and Systems. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I may use this one. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be in Tromsø. I'm actually was born in this region and raised up here. I'm coming from Lavangen, not far away from this city. All right, I will take it and looking into influence of the green shift in shipping and also what is the consequences for this region. Yeah, well, I may say I'm from NTNU, but I also have an adjunct position at the UIT. And I'm also associated with Maersk McKinney Møller for zero carbon shipping. So I will bring all these elements in my lecture here. So first I start with the bigger picture, and I think I can go pretty fast through that because I have heard that story now, I would say 20, 30 times. So, but anyway, bear with me. And then I will take up some of the learnings from this foundation from Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller for zero carbon shipping, because it will hit us. And then doing some reflections on the way ahead. So first, I think it's important just to be aware. Norway is a huge player in the oceans. And as we have heard about the blue economy, but also when it comes to research management. And so this is important. So that is already known. But what is also very important to be aware of is that we have what we call a supercluster in Norway. That means that we have a very strong interest in shipping, in oil and gas, of course, offshore renewables, in particular offshore wind, in fisheries, in aquacultures, tourism, and we also see new, you could say within ocean science and management, but where we also can see new potential, and maybe marine mining. Marine mining is the third time in my professional years of work that I'm seeing coming up and down, up and down. So, and to be honest, it's too early. We don't know what's going on there. That's my opinion. But anyway, so if you're looking to this, the UN Sustainability Development Goals, how does this fit into this? Well, if you're looking to the caring for the planet ocean, we have global challenges. We have also to look into the value creations, going into all these blue industries, and we also have how are we going to manage these oceans, and where also we from the university and research institutes, we are focused on knowledge and competence. And for me, also having a background from industry, the UN Sustainability Development Goals are actually the biggest market analysis ever done. So if you are going to be relevant in the market in the next decades, read those carefully. And we are also seeing that this is not only more about words, it's also about realities. And we are saying also that this is going from PowerPoint presentations into Excel sheets. Also saying that this is now coming in the boards of the directors in different companies. So, but also what we have heard about these days is that we have a lot of, you could say, severe global challenges. Climate, biodiversity, pollutions, and also security. And then we have enabling technologies, and we also have a question about license to operate. And for me, it's very important that we are not going from one pitfall to the other one. And this is actually also a reality. It's not straightforward. What should we do in order to have clean energy and without destroying nature even more? So I think this needs knowledge, but it also needs leadership. So if we're looking to zero-carbon shipping, what does that mean? It means electrifications, batteries, new fuel types, which are low to zero emission of greenhouse gases. There is also associated with a tremendous ramp-up of renewable energy, using hydropower, wind, sun, and also not necessarily renewable, but nuclear power plants is also a part of this picture. In particular, also looking into fusion reactors, which is very promising. This is also associated with energy storage, and that is hydropower. Just look into the debate we have now with the EU, batteries, but what is also important to be aware of, that these fuels are also energy storage. And energy storage, together with renewables, is one of the main keys. And then we have a lot of new fuel types, such as ammonia, hydrogen, methanol, and others. And also what we can notice, it is electrification and electronics everywhere. And this is, again, pushing a lot of new requirements and creating dilemmas. That is about, what about energy and fuel security? What about minerals? And what about the increased spatial footprints with threats on habitats and loss of biodiversity? And then I also like to mention this, what I call green colonization. That means that are we going to take more of untouched important land and seas to the so-called better, to the greater good? And is it really that. So I'm actually really concerned about the plans going up now in Hammerfest and the solution they have been proposed so far. I think it is a huge mistake. Okay, so now into the Maersk McKinney Møller for zero carbon shipping. I have been there as a secondee during my sabbatical, and I can also say I have been following this center as a board member since it started up many, many years ago. So if you look into the global picture of shipping, there is approximately 100,000 of ships in the world. The tons of fossil fuels consumed is 300 million. And of this, 3% of the global CO2 emissions come from the shipping. Of this, the deep sea shipping or the global shipping is about 70% of the emissions. So that is actually the numbers. So shipping is not that bad, but as we will see, the shipping is still in a position to be one of the game changers in this decarbonization strategy. So this is looking into the projections of the emissions, and we are speaking about terms well to wake. That means every, you could say, all steps from production and to use. That's well to wake. There is also a tank to wake that is only looking into the ships, and it's not looking good. So we are. So this is where we are today, and if you're looking to where we are aiming to, this is the red numbers. So even if we are doing some initiatives, it really doesn't make any impression. If we don't do anything, we will simply increase. So these are the targets where you should go in order to reach the Paris requirements. So we are worried about the progress. If you're looking to what is driving this, well, this is actually coming up by a perceptions put into force by United Nations and the IMO, that is the International Maritime Organization. So it's saying that we should be targeted to be net zero by 2050. And there is now also put up targets for 2030, 2040. So for those of you familiar to shipping, you know that the ships normally lives 20 to 30 years. So that means that this is now coming into decision as we speak when it comes to new type of ships. There's a lot of text, you can read it afterwards. If you're looking to the center, the center is a non-profit center. It is actually a donation from the Maersk family of 1 billion Norwegian kroners to put this up in force. And the vision is actually to drive sustainable decarbonization of the shipping within 2050. So what are we working on? Well, we are working on reduced fleet energy demand, how to transform the energy system, how to catalyze the ecosystem transition, and how also to advance this going even faster. And we are looking into the complete, you could say, value chain on ecosystem. That is regulators, policymakers. It's also the financial sector. And we also believe that the financial sector is actually very important because they are looking into security of their investment. So this, what happens if these ships becomes out of business in 5 years? How to deal with that? And then you have knowledge providers and then all players in the maritime industry. And if you're looking to who are with this initiative, well, here you see the strategic partners, and you find the most dominant and most or largest shipping companies actually in the world on this. So if you don't or doubt if this will happen, forget about it. It will happen. So here inertia matters. So those has agreed to set up a strategy, and then there is a knowledge partner, and I'm NTNU. We are also one of the academic partners here. There is also numbers of mission ambassadors that are driving this forward. So this will hit in. If you're looking to the different fuel types, this is, I would say, a mess. There are numbers of fuel types that we are speaking about: e-ammonia, blue ammonia, e-methanol, biomethanol, e-methane, biomethane, and e-diesel, and biofuels. And here you see an overview where we regard them if they are ready to be implemented or not. And then we are speaking about feedstock availability, fuel production, fuel storage, logistics, and also how are we going to take them on board safely in the ships, and what about regulations. Now, this figure is also a little bit dense, but this is important. We are speaking about, you notice it was said E. That means that we are also speaking about green fuels. They are E. So that they are based on green or renewables, where you do electrolysis, and then you get e-hydrogen or ammonia or others. Then there is another term important. That is called blue fuels. Those are produced from natural gas, hydrocarbons, going through carbon capture and storage, and then you follow a new line and get what we call blue fuels. Of course, they are not net zero as the green, but there is definitely a significant reduction in CO2. Then you have biomass. So this figure is important, and this as well. So when we started off the center in 2020, we thought, to be honest, that renewables should be able to produce the needed amount of fuels. But that is not the case. So what we see, in order to fill in this transition, we need to fill in with other alternatives. And what pops up to be, I would say, a really good option is what we call blue fuels. And it is those actors in the oil industry that has the industry capacity actually to ramp up that fast. And for Norway, it is a significant, you could say, possibility. So if you're looking into like to look into more of the reports, just looking and visit this website. All of this is open. And these are the two ladies that can help you with that. Okay, so if you're now looking on the reflections, is this a threat and an opportunity? We assume that the cost of energy will increase 3 to 10 times in the years to come. That means a lot. And I will also say it's some type of crisis, but and almost all transitions feels like a crisis. But never waste it, because there is huge business opportunities in this as well. And we see now also a race globally who are going to position themselves in this emerging market. And if you're going back again to this figure, we see that we are looking for measures that push this down. Here are the main drivers. It is still regulations, IMO, it is EU, it is national regulations. It's also about the market demand. And more and more companies have to comply to Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 in order to justify their emissions. The financial sector is another very important player here that is starting to question about the security of their loans. Then we have incentives, like there will be tax on greenhouse gases. We are also speaking about green corridors, and where also government, together with industry, can push this forward. And then also companies seeing business opportunities. So what now happened in Bodø, where they were looking into a huge hydrogen plant, is an example of such. Then the only thing we know for sure is that you should do is on energy efficiency. So that is the only silver bullet we have here, that you should use less. That is both on the ships itself, but also about fleet optimization. We also see that this will, in a way, create radical innovations in the maritime. New ship designs. We are speaking about hybrid power plants, low-speed, uncrewed, autonomous ships. So we see the fuel consumption increase with the speed in 3 cubic. So if you can go slower, you will pollute less, use less. And one reason for why ships are going with the speed they do is simply that there are people on board. We also see it's coming up wind and wave and current assistant propulsion systems. So, but looking again to the fuels, there is no winner as we see today. There will be alternatives, and they will also be both in global context but also in local context. So, but what I like to stress is that Norway, also with the oil and gas sector, can play a vital role in the next 20, 30 years in order to provide blue fuels. So if we're going back again to Hammerfest, why couldn't we go with big-scale CCS and then electrify it by gas turbines and using the gas as it is instead of ending in another conflict with the locals and the world. So, so I'm also saying that we need, there is a lot of, they are speaking about we need more knowledge. No, we don't need more knowledge to implement. We know this. We need execution. Of course, we can supplement with knowledge. So there is possibilities with the green fuel production, both by large and small-scale plants. This is also a possibility for Norway, in addition to blue fuels. Where we see new possibilities for blue fuels, that is in Mongstad, Kårstø, Kolsnes, Tjeldbergodden, Hammerfest, and also offshore platforms. It's also interesting to look into Norway, where we are speaking about small off-grid societies. So why are we not using this possibility also to electrify Svalbard as a test for where we're also producing green fuels in parallel? So what is we need to start to work on this, and there is huge uncertainty now about what signals and what incentives are in a way given by authorities, and how could we match the value chain between the users and the producers so it becomes more predictable when they are doing their investment decisions. So it's time to act, coordinate it. I will also going to end this session. I'm also affiliated with UIT. We are actually there looking into a completely new green research vessel. It's called the Floating Campus. So this will be the first green research ship of Norway. Will be used for education and research and innovations. It will operate in the Barents Sea and also the seas around Svalbard. Very likely the home port will be Longyearbyen. Why not also use this as one of the drivers to really set this in order for execution? So to summarize, the maritime transportation will remain still as one of the most primary logistics functions in the world. Because the cost for the goods you are traveling in deep sea is not that big difference. The effect of consumers are small. However, if you're looking to, again, this region, the consequence for the fishing fleet, coastal fleet, can be tremendous. So how are we going to help them through this transition? There will come up new supply chains of green and blue fuels. And we also have to analyze the effect of, okay, what type of pollution do we get now from ammonia on the ecosystems? So that is also knowledge we don't know about. And there will be new business possibilities. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Askar, for opening this up and providing such a wonderful, comprehensive overview on what we can expect, some of the current technologies and the challenges. But I would like to open us up for a question or two, if anybody has one. Over there.
Yeah, I can just speak loudly. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Kirsten Steinke. Thank you. Previously worked for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the United States. And my question is, given the possibilities of both blue and green fuels for shipping, have you partnered or thought about working with some of these offshore industries like Northern Lights, which is doing, large-scale carbon storage, or some of the proposed offshore blue hydrogen projects, which would, eliminate the need for a pipeline if you could just directly use it as shipping fuel?
Yeah, I can say if I was not going that fast through the partners, you will notice that there were 3 energy companies in the partnership here. It is Equinor, it is Total, and it's BP. But it's fair to say that when at least Equinor did go in, they thought about decarbonization of their own ships and their fleet. That is also huge. But then they're starting to realize that it's more into it. It's actually a new market. So what is a local, I would say, challenge in Norway is that we have to supply Europe with all our gas in order to replace the Russian gas. And that, in a way, is not making the appetite for going in this investment that high. That's what I am assuming. But I think that can be a risky business because there are others that are going to do that. So at some point, you see the possibilities on blue fuels from Texas. Even if Trump is there, this is huge business potential for Texas to take a role. You see, and again, Russia coming back. You also see the Gulf states. So I think Norway should consider their position here. And what you are referring to, this Northern Light project, is definitely a good one. But I think we need to scale this up rather fast and also to lower the cost, actually.
Thank you very much. I just have one more question, but can you actually comment on some of the research priorities related to the infrastructure of implementing any of these innovations and new technologies?
Yeah, there are many. If you're, as I said, if you're looking to the silver bullet, as I mentioned, that is energy efficiency. So sometimes I am, by my master degree is marine technology. And in a way, if you look into ship design, if you're looking to how you're operating, you find more or less an optimization point. But if now cost of energy increased 3 to 10 times, then everything is a play again. And what was regarded as marginal effects becomes actually very important. So that is on the ships. And that is also about fostering new alternative propulsion systems like wind. We are also speaking about low speed, setting up completely new trades with the uncrewed ships. So that is on that part. If you're looking to CCS, it is obviously important to go massive in order to get the volume and also the supply chain around that on a reasonable price. So, and then, as I also mentioned, we should not forget that this new, call it chemical components from ammonia others. Ammonia is extremely poisoned, but what I can tell you that the energy makers are already, if they have not solved it, it is almost there. But still, it is important to have safe, I would say, handling of that. So, but in general, the obstacle is actually not on those, I would call them details. It's just to set a direction and go for it. And what makes me worried is that we don't have time to wait in 5 years and looking for more knowledge, more reports. We have to start to act.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, next I would like to introduce Anais Rios at Seas at Risk, and she's going to be talking about maximizing energy efficiency.
Thank you. Thanks. Oof. All right, so today we're going to explore the intersection between shipping, climate change, and the strategies for a sustainable future for the Arctic and globally. I need to figure out how that works. Okay, so why focus on the Arctic, shipping specifically? The Arctic, as you know, is rapidly changing. We have now this being a focal point for the shipping industry as the sea ice is melting. We have also access with a bigger season for shipping, and even the potential soonish to have a yearly access to shipping to the Northern Sea route. There is also a lot of people looking at the Northwest Passage. So actually shipping in the Arctic from 2013 to 2023 has already increased massively. We're talking about a 37% increase. And most importantly, the time that ships have spent in the region has doubled. This already had significant environmental impacts. So we're talking about almost a doubling of CO2 emissions in the region. We're also talking about more than a double rise in black carbon. Black carbon is soot. That has a significant effect on sea ice melt, and so also in climate change in general. And then we also are seeing a rise in the methane emissions as some ships are moving towards LNG as their fuel. So, yeah, I mean, those are other numbers that you can look at. But these trends basically highlight the need for a mitigation right now of the potential risks of Arctic shipping. Now, what is I say globally? Shipping, as you just heard, represents 3% of global emissions of greenhouse gases. But to put that in perspective, if shipping were a country, this would be the equivalent of what Germany or Japan, for example, are emitting yearly. So this is still significant, even though it only is 3%. The International Maritime Organization, the UN body that regulates the shipping, passed in summer 2023 the decarbonization strategy of the shipping sector. This puts goal for the industry to decarbonize the sector in steps. So we're looking at a 30% of decarbonization by 2030, 80% by 2040, and then a full decarbonization by 2050. For this to actually happen, we will need to have a full paradigm shift for shipping, and to understand that there is a hierarchy of tools for the transition. So what we're looking at is energy efficiency, and then also a widespread of wind technology for basically any ships. That is something that is doable. And then we're looking at uptaking of zero-emission fuels. All of that through the understanding that we will need this transition to be fair and equitable for all and all nations. So if we look at energy efficiency, those are practical tools that are already available right now for any ship's operators. So we're talking about operations, but also design. So I'm going to tell you a little bit, some examples. You can see also numbers on the slides. But if we implement, for example, if a ship operator implements more hull cleaning of its ship, if we're looking at maybe reducing the speed of 20% of the vessel, this can be done in different ways. It can be done also understanding that like a majority of the sector right now, ships sail fast and then wait at ports. And so with very simple things like a change of clause in contracts, or maybe a better monitoring or communication with the ports, ships could maybe at average sail slower and then arrive at port when there is availability for them to enter. What else? Well, again, talking about retrofitting of vessels with wind, we think that this is basically a no-brainer, brings a lot of energy efficiency, even on vessels that are not made for wind primarily, so vessels that are already seagoing right now today. Also, we just wanted to point something when we talk about speed reduction. This has also co-benefits because it reduces the noise, undersea water noise, but also tremendously reduces collision with whales. Addressing challenges of new fuels. We just talked about it a little. First of all, I wanted to mention something. That is that I mentioned wind as an opportunity for energy efficiency, which is the case, but wind is also a propelling vector for vessel. Wind is also, I think, I'm not an engineer, but the best efficient source of power to energy that exists today. And so, to us, it is a no-brainer to consider wind as a fuel or a major propelling vector for shipping. To talk about numbers, if you take an average vessel that is ongoing today, seagoing today, you put a sail on it, it would have about 30% of the fuel generated by this for a voyage. This is massive. And then when we start talking about the challenges of new fuels, which are cost, we're talking about maybe 5 to 6 times more expensive than current fossil fuels. We're talking about issues with competition in between sectors. Then if you can save 30% of the consumption of your vessel as globally, this is going to be just massive for the future. This is also a sector fuel that is going to be needing a lot of incentives for it to be scaled up to what it needs to be. So reducing the need of fuel is going to be just massive. Other issues about the new fuels that are not just about the market is that most of them have environmental concerns, if not safety concerns. So ammonia, for example, is most probably going to be one of the main shipping fuel in the future. Ammonia is highly toxic. Ammonia is also highly explosive. That generates a lot of safety concerns for the seafarers. And then ammonia has the potential to disrupt the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen, as you may know, is one of the planetary boundaries that has been exceeded maybe decades ago already now. So we probably don't want to add any nitrogen in the system. Role of equitable emissions levy. So again, that's been talked before, but it's important to make sure that this transition that we're going to go through is going to be fair, equitable, and leaves no one behind. Now, one of the main benefits, one of the main factor we've seen for that is to include a levy, a pollution fee, for the industry. At the International Maritime Organization, there are proposals of putting a $150 levy per ton. That could bring $60 billion yearly. This would help for innovations when we talk about new fuels, battery, wind propulsion, but also would be a major help to make sure that the communities in the small independent developing islands or the least developed countries can actually bear the cost of the transition. And I'm coming up to time, but these are the frameworks that are worked at the IMO, being negotiated right now at the IMO about all of these. So the carbon intensity indicator is about energy efficiency. It's being negotiated and has to be reviewed by 2026. The global fuel standard is a mechanism at the IMO that is going to see the phased out of fossil fuel, and then the levy that is going to be the overall equity framework. And that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very fantastic presentation. We have time for one question.
Hi, my name is Taya. I'm from Nunavut, Northern Canada, so interested in the Northwest Passage and shipping. I have to say, Nunavut and Nunavumi are very against shipping going into the Northwest Passage because of the impact it would have on our ecosystem in the water. So you spoke a little bit about how green energy fueling the ships would reduce noise going into the water, and I wanted to hear a bit more about that because that's one of the major concerns is when ships go through, it disturbs the natural migration pattern of the whales and other animals, and having more ships coming through the Northwest Passage year-round would significantly change the pattern that Inuit are used to where they find their whales for hunting and sustenance. So I was just really kind of curious to hear a bit more about that if you could.
Yeah. I was talking about reduction of speed. Sorry if I wasn't clear. So it wasn't e-fuels putting into the vessels, but it was about the energy efficiency. So reducing speed, but also, do we have music now?
Maybe.
Okay. Reducing speed, but also putting sails on top. And I'm not talking about the 17th century sail. I'm talking about rotary sail, or it's high tech. And so putting wind propulsion on top vessel reduces the need for a motor, and so reduces the need, the underwater noise. Basically, it's just the fact that the propeller is either going slower or not being used at all.
Thank you. I just think, yeah, I just wanted to note that it's a serious concern for Inuit in the north. That's our livelihood. So for anyone who is in the shipping industry, it's not the solution from our perspective.
Yeah. And if I can, I don't know if I said that number, but they did a study in the European waters where they saw that a 20% of speed reduction for ships would reduce 67% the little whale strikes. Sorry. And when we talk about noise, it's not just about collisions, but that also is something that is significant.
It's like the little whales have a sonar on their head, so when ships come, they hear from thousands of miles away, and that disperses them. So years ago, there was belugas stuck in one community because the ice had formed too soon and there was no air holes. And the Canadian government wanted to send in a freighter, like an icebreaker. And the community said no, because what would happen if that icebreaker came in, all that noise would send the beluga out of gear and they would all die under the ice anyways. And so, yeah, just something to consider.
Thank you very much. I think for the sake of time, we'll continue, but I really encourage that we have these discussions during the panel or even afterwards. Thank you. Fantastic. And next, I would like to introduce Ina Alquist. She's coming from Sintef Ocean, and she'll be talking about presenting on the fishing industry challenges in adopting emerging technologies.
Hello, and thank you so much for the introduction. I'm here to talk about the green transition for fisheries, and more specifically, I'm going into the entry barriers to the green transition for Arctic fisheries using the Norwegian coastal fisheries as a case. And the work here behind this presentation is a part of the Zero-Kyst project, which is a green platform project that looks on different solutions on how to enable a zero-emission coastline in Norway, and particularly in the Arctic part of Norway. So first, I felt like I wanted to share a little on the background of coastal fisheries in Norway. So Arctic fisheries and Norwegian fisheries especially are very important for coastal communities. They serve as a cornerstone. They're important for local employment systems, and they're important for the value chains that are there locally too. And in the coastal segment of the Norwegian fisheries, there are more than 4,000 vessels. That equals to a lot of fishers that in turn generate value and ripple effects for their communities. And traditionally, this segment has been perceived as the most sustainable, at least if you compare it to the deep sea fleet. The fisheries occur near the shore with the use of conventional fishing gear. This results in relatively low fuel consumption per kilo of catch and lower operating costs. But if we are standing here today and talking about the green transition, and especially if we're going into zero emissions, then this segment cannot be left out, because they still do account for 20% of the Norwegian fisheries' fuel consumption. So what is actually then the green transition for fisheries? Where arguably a major part of it is to reduce the carbon footprint of fisheries and related activities. And this has been reflected in several policies and also emission reduction targets that both nations and industry work towards. In this case, relevant ones are, for instance, Norway's climate agreement with the EU of 40% reduction from the 2005 levels by 2030. We have national ambitious goals from Norway's side of a 50 to 55% reduction from 1990 levels by 2030. And we also have the Paris Agreement of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. But the clock is ticking, and we're still emitting more CO2 than we should if we are to meet these goals on time. So then what can we actually do in this context of Norwegian coastal fisheries? It's highly recognized that this sector has several different types of vessels. There are different sizes, there are different sorts, they have different fishing gear on board and operate differently. So consequently, we see that there are several efforts for financial support for different green projects for greener fishing vessels and ports, and we also see other policy mechanisms such as the CO2 taxation. And this one is increasing and soon to be over 2,000 Norwegian kroner per ton CO2. But while some of these policies push for fast emission cuts, the fishing industry needs to remain economically viable and socially sustainable. And it's relevant because trading out these energy systems, it's expensive. And they're encouraged to do so while costs are increasing, the quotas are going down, a lot of the infrastructure is lacking. There are several safety concerns, especially related to ammonia and hydrogen. And they have upper limits on how long their vessels can be. So to navigate this complexity of these many challenges, decision makers, that's both the policymakers and the industry itself, they need some guidelines, something to follow in order to know how should we proceed to actually achieve a green transition. And the existing guidelines developed from traditional fisheries management that aim to achieve social, biological, and economic sustainability. Because historically, as the catch capacities in fisheries increased, we entered into a state of overfishing. But luckily, after some crisis, we learned that, okay, the ocean has its limits. We can't just keep taking. So as a consequence, a new fisheries management regime arose, and we had the introduction of scientifically sanctioned annual total allowable catches to ensure long-term biological sustainability. And to ensure social and economic sustainability too, we needed to allocate this total quota among different vessels. And this is where we got restrictions on the lengths, because that would divide the fishing sector into different groups of vessels. But the challenge now is that we're no longer talking about biological sustainability alone. We have moved over to environmental sustainability. So we still need to secure the resource base, but we also need to do something about the climate dimension. And this is where these green energy systems come into place, because they let us do something about this climate part. But another challenge that I haven't mentioned is that these energy systems, they are quite space demanding. They take up more room, especially if you compare it to the traditional diesel combustion engines. And when you then have a restriction on how long your vessel can be, it makes sense that even if infrastructure would be in place, even if fishers would receive sufficient financial support, and even if the safety concerns were sorted out, these restrictions on the length of the vessels could still put a stopper for this technology implementation. So I do believe that, yes, we need to look at further development of technologies, but we just as much need to look at how we can improve our governance, our policies and regulations. So one of the suggestions that have been made is to move away from these strict regulations and over to more liberal ones, where you, for instance, switches parameters from these lengths and over to cargo volume. This is what you do for the bigger vessels already. And this would allow for vessel designs that are more streamlined and therefore uses less energy when moving through the water. But the problem is that it would also entail having bigger vessels. And this can in turn threaten the existing production structures that are so important for social and economic sustainability in these coastal communities. And this specific debate has been recognized by the Norwegian government. We see that in the recent white paper on fisheries, Kvotemelding 2.0, which is called in Norwegian. They say that they will put down an expert group to investigate whether changing these policies and regulations can actually be an effective tool to facilitate the green transition also in fisheries. And this is almost a year ago, and I'm still waiting for this progress, you know? So back to what you also mentioned earlier, we need to act, we need to see action. And in this part, we need to include industry, and we need to include science. So to summarize my talk, the ambitious climate targets have due dates that are really close. 2030 is just around the corner. 2050 will be so too. So we need to accelerate our progression. We still need development of technologies, and we still need development of infrastructure. But just as important, we need development of our governance and policies. And it remains to be seen which coordinated efforts and which priorities will pave the best way forward for a sustainable, resilient Arctic. But what is sure is that we can't keep doing the exact thing that we're doing now, because we're not getting there in time. So something has to change if we're going to meet present needs and also meet our future climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina. Fantastic presentation as well. I would like to open up, we can have time for one more question. Is anybody?
Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you so much. My name is Samantha Farquhar. I'm from the United States, East Carolina University. I work with coastal fisheries in North Carolina, and it's, we have all sorts of issues there, but one of the things we have is a lot of our smaller scale fishers have associations or lobby organizations. So when sometimes unrealistic policies are put on them, they can kind of fight back. I'm curious to know if Norwegian coastal fisheries have kind of political power and how they use it, and what they ultimately think of this demand to transition.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. So yes, in Norway we have very strong traditions of having collaboration between the industry from the fisheries sides and also policy. We have our own fisheries organizations. There's one that is a little dramatic right now since they're about to split up a little bit, but yes, every suggested policy comes out on a hearing, and the industry meets together, and they, in these organizations they develop these notes that are høringsuttalelse is the Norwegian word, but the hearing response, if you may, and then they submit it to the government and they have to go through it. So on the one side, the government aims to acknowledge the industry's input as much as possible, but at the other side, they also have the hat of trying to fulfill these climate goals and targets that they have, that Norway has said that we are going to meet. So I guess it's a balance between those, and it's kind of where what my presentation also comes down to, because it's then trying to balance these different perspectives and dimensions of sustainability. And yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I think we'll go on to the last presenter, and then we will have more time for discussions. Fantastic. Thank you, Ina. Okay, and then we have our last presenter. I would like to introduce Gabriella Battaglia. She's coming from the University of Bologna, and she will present on the benefits of expanding renewable energy and promoting sustainable development.
Hello everyone. Today I will tell you about my master thesis on renewable energy consumption and CO2 intensity in the Arctic region. Despite differences among the members of the Arctic Council, there are some touch points in between these countries. We know the Arctic region faces complex challenges when it comes to ensuring well-being of communities and ecosystems from economic, social, and environmental standpoints. So what are the touch points in between the countries? We have remote location, extreme climate conditions, limited infrastructure systems, indigenous communities. There are right holders, stakeholders present on the land since immemorial time. We have huge challenges when it comes to balancing energy security, ensuring energy independence, and balancing those factors with environmental protection and also energy and resource management and resource exploitation. We know, as it was already mentioned from another panelist before, that the Arctic is warming 3 times faster compared to the global average. And this is due to anthropic activity and primarily fossil fuel combustion that lead to an increase in temperatures in the region. So this is why I decided to focus on measuring how renewable energy consumption can impact CO2 intensity. So to look into how the energy that we consume can have an impact on emissions that we produce. And I decided to focus my research on the Arctic region, so on the 8 member states of the Arctic Council within a significant time frame of 25 years, starting from 1990. My research question looks into a potential contribution of the energy transition, so renewable energy consumption, to look at the impact that renewable energy transition has on the intensity of carbon dioxide within the time frame and within the Arctic. And my hypothesis is that there is an actual contribution of renewable energy consumption on the reduction of carbon dioxide within the time frame selected. I decided to focus on this region because these type of studies has been conducted for South Asian countries, for OECD countries, for EU countries, but it has never been focused solely on the Arctic region, and that's why I wanted to focus on that, because of the critical economic, environmental, social challenges it currently faces, and because of the fact that it's an underrepresented region when it comes to this type of research. So, as I already mentioned, anthropic activity, primarily combustion of fossil fuels, lead to climate consequences, especially in terms of rising temperatures and phenomena as polar amplification, sea ice decline, and thawing of permafrost. These impact severely the ecosystems of the Arctic in terms of biodiversity loss, also changing landscape, and coastal erosion, and we know that this phenomenon has huge impacts on infrastructure, leading often to collapse and disruption of infrastructure, which of course has huge and severe consequences on population, especially when it comes to interruption of basic needs and inaccessibility of basic services. And these lead, of course, to social consequences, especially when it comes to psychological and cultural distress, potential relocation for some communities, and increase in poverty and inaccessibility as needs, as I already mentioned. So because of these critical challenges, it's important to transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable energy-based economy in order to ensure that climate change is mitigated, especially for what concern rising temperatures. However, the Arctic has historically relied on finite resources, and this is because of the availability of the resources in the territory, especially the Arctic, according to the US Geological Survey. In the Arctic, we have the 10% of global oil resources and 25% of natural gas resources. In the map, we can see the distribution of potential undiscovered resources. We see they are distributed across the Arctic, so they do not concern just one country, but the whole territory. And the brown one is the high concentration, correspond to the high concentration of resource of oil or gas resources. And we see they are distributed across the Beaufort Sea, the Barents Sea, and a bit all over the circle. On water, and then on the green one are the one on land, so mainly Siberia, but also a bit across the rest of the circle. So because the environmental impact and risk linked to transportation, processing, and extraction of these resources has been really high across the years, and because the combustion of these resources lead to an increase of GHG emission and therefore temperature and all the consequences that we have previously seen, it is important to start rethinking to a transition that takes into account communities, ecosystems, and moves away from fossil fuel and potential environmental impacts. So my research focused on selecting two variables. I chose an independent variable, which was renewable energy consumption, so meaning the share of renewable energy consumption on the total energy consumption, and a dependent variable, meaning the CO2 intensity is called. So it's kilos of CO2 emitted over kilos of oil equivalent energy use, and it's very interesting metrics because it can basically tells us about the environmental impact of energy consumption. And in this way, I was able to isolate my research on the consumption of energy, so looking at energy consumption and emission linked to that. I used the panel data analysis approach, and I gathered my data from the World Bank database for all 8 countries and both variables. And panel data analysis is a type of statistical regression, this type of statistical method research, which is relevant because it allows you to look for linearity. So my first test was linearity, and the results are depicted in this graph, which is called a scatter plot, and tells us about the relationship in between the two variables. And as we see, what I found was that over time there is a consistent decrease in CO2 intensity when we increase renewable energy consumption. And beside that, it's interesting to look at variation, which are the outliers, these scatter data points around the graph, like in the above part, that do not follow the trend, and these are linked mostly to variation, so of energy source mix, constraints of the local grid, and policy measure that differs across the sample. The second test that I conducted, it's called fixed effects, and is another typical feature of panel data. It's very interesting because it can allow us to see how renewable energy impacted CO2 emission intensity, and we saw that there is a significant effect on CO2. So even here, the expectation of my research are confirmed. There is a decrease in CO2 intensity. However, Norway presents a different case because the value is non-significant. So we will look into that later. And also, I looked into the weight of the variable. So R squared, this data here, show us the sort of a share. So how much the renewable energy consumption impacts the variable of carbon dioxide intensity. And we see the share varies a lot across the sample, which is really interesting. For example, for Iceland, we have 95%. So we can explain the variation by 95% using the renewable energy consumption data. And instead, for example, Russia, we have 36%. So we have a very different outcome. And more specifically on the case of Norway, personally, I could research on some policies, and I noticed that, so my research started from 1990, and from 1990, several energy measures were put in place, especially regarding energy efficiency measure for buildings with the Climate and Energy Fund in 2001, and also carbon tax that was kickstarted in 1991. And these mechanisms helped reduce and had an impact on data, and helped reduce energy-related emissions, and in a way, so that is why we can explain through other factors why there is a decrease in carbon intensity, but it's not primarily linked to renewable energy consumption. So as outcomes, we can say that it's confirmed that across the region, there is a correlation in between these two variables, and so that we have to phase out fossil fuels in order to allow for climate mitigation to happen, and to allow for limiting also rising temperatures to happen. However, it's very important to remind, which is for me what I took mostly away from this research, is that there is definitely a need of a integrated pan-Arctic strategy when it comes to renewable energy development, and when it comes to a sustainable, holistic, and equitable approach in the Arctic. It takes into account communities and ecosystem needs and preservation. And I personally think that the the differences that the Arctic states present and that I could observe through this research when it comes to energy mix, when it comes to energy policies and environmental practices, is also the strength of the Arctic. So in order to integrate one strategy together and to address climate change is super crucial that the Arctic states come together with also their own different policies and compare them with each other and build up an Arctic strategy to tackle the problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a really nice presentation and to help to kind of close up all the topics in this presentation part of the session. We can have time for one question. Nope? Okay, then just give us a few minutes and we'll start preparing for the panel session and we'll start to open up the discussion.
Okay.
Great. Oh, yeah. It's okay. I'll just, yeah. Okay. No, just keep it on, it's fine. Yeah, yeah, they're going to switch it on and off. Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll continue. So first, thank you again for all the speakers to open up this discussion. And I would like to actually ask one of the first questions, but I really encourage the audience to think about some good ones as well. And I would also like to ask, if you do have a question, please specify whether or not you want, this is for the whole panel or someone specifically. Okay, so just for the big picture, I think we talked about a lot of really good topics and a lot of challenges that really we're dealing with right now to implement a lot of green transition, to go into the green transition. So what are your thoughts? And this is for everyone. How do you think that politicians and industry and funding agencies and national and international types of policies can ensure that new technologies align with practical requirements as well as community interests that go beyond funding opportunities? I mean, is it all just throwing money at the problem and funding short-term research and development, or is there another option that can allow us to move a little closer to this and have a shared set of values?
Well, it's a huge question, so I can start off just a little bit. So I think that one of the key things when talking about the green transition is first talking about the green transition for who. So who are the stakeholders? So if, for my case, for instance, working a lot with fisheries, in this sense, no, just throwing funding at the problem will not solve it, but meeting with the industry, I think, is the way to go. So be at the arenas where the stakeholders are, get input from them, tell them about funding opportunities, because this is something that I've noticed that they're very interested in. Like, where can you have funding to do something develop new technologies or new vessel designs or this type. So how can you get the tools that you need to contribute to the green transition?
Right. Thank you. And Asgard?
Yeah, there is a lot of funding in Norway on research. And it's also, if you're going to have funding for, I would say, research and innovation, it's not that bad. But what I'm looking for is more the huge investment, where we are speaking about how could we, in a way, between industry and government and research, set up, I would say, full-scale implementation of CCS, production of this blue fuel, in order to take down the risk. And I think there is a need to get the ball rolling. And that's where I'm actually asking that the government and also the industry needs to meet, to agree and to set up a plan on a high scale or a big scale. So why not start in Hammerfest and go further south? That's my question.
But we're not talking about just Norway, right? We're talking about internationally.
Yeah, but
so more or less integrated pan-Arctic strategy.
Yeah, that's Norway. But if you're looking also to small scale, I would say solutions there's a lot of common between Norway, Canada, US, and Russia. And I think we have to collaborate much better. And when I'm looking to the funding mechanism, it is very national, very little pan-Arctic. And that is something we need to improve on in order to have standards on the fuels and standards of even also how we are actually measuring the data from the oceans. So we need actually to have a closer collaboration, I think.
You can answer this, and then I can.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say that. Well, first in shipping, there is a lot of players, and so that makes it very complicated to adopt any type of change or to really understand where are the tipping points. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that we're looking at both the ship itself, but also we're looking at the energy sector. And so the industry doesn't seem to be asking for any money to retrofit their vessels, but there is a big concern about stranded assets. Because, as you mentioned, when we build a vessel, we're talking about a 20 to 30 years lifespan. So if we have a vessel that is, let's say, going on LNG, being built right now, but by 2040 you can't use any LNG for your vessel, then what do you do with this? So that's one thing. But then when we talk about the energy production and specifically bunkering of marine fuels, we will need a lot of incentives. And this is when passing the IMO regulations will be critical. So those are being negotiated this year. But also potentially national help or European framework will be needed for the uptake of those fuels. And just one last thing, it seems that the European Union is going to go all in on ammonia production. So I guess this will be positive and good for zero-emission fuels, understanding that there's all of those problems I mentioned about ammonia. Yet it seems that we won't be able to sort of stop it, and also do we want to stop innovation anyway? That's probably not the way to go, but yeah.
Can I just add something?
Absolutely.
On the matter of funding, I think rather than short-term solution that you mentioned in the question, it would be better to plan long-term investment. And then I think that also it's crucial to strengthen cooperation between energy sector, shipping sector, and also digitalization. So, for example, to strengthen emission tracking systems within vessels.
That's very good input. So we're saying that actually, so then the regulations could really be the basis to actually encourage like the impetus for a national framework, and then we move from there to really give the buy-in. Thank you very much. Do we have a question from the audience?
Laurence Frémion-Pitras. I work in a maritime autonomy company, which is a spin-off of NTNU, TBUS. And actually, we see that autonomy provides quite some improvements with respect to energy, lower consumption. and also a lot of good merits, collision, safety, whatsoever. And the thing is that the regulation towards autonomy so far is really, really minimal. It's really by exemption. We will have in 2025 the implementation of the mass code by the IMO, but it's just like a start. And the question is, how do we help entrepreneurs, also startups like Zebus, for example, to have the possibility to have a sandbox, although it's not really relevant to the sea, but how can we have the chance to implement new solutions with limited risk from the regulation side? Today, it's a very difficult issue, and also for our potential clients.
Yeah. I think that's a very good question.
So what are the canals and what are the leverage we can use to implement that and have this social acceptance, which precedes actually the implementation of new regulations, right?
Yep, I agree. And I think this is a challenge because the Arctic is a very unregulated area in a way. So would anybody like to answer this question?
Yes, I can do. Thank you for the question. And you have these regulations which are global. Then you have local regulations, and we have also inside EU. But there is one mechanism we have tested out when it comes to the greener ships. That's also called green corridors. So why not go for autonomous corridors? Because I think that is actually a viable solution. Both that, as I mentioned, that the emission goes up with the speed of the third. So going slower is actually one reason to, and even if you need more ships, but you are setting up a new logistic patterns, and there will also be, you could say, emissions related to steel and production of that. So we also see that uncrewed ships can actually be built cheaper because you don't have the same safety regulations. So I think actually one long-term answer on this green shift is actually, or the end game is also more autonomous ships. So a starting point could actually be this, called it autonomous corridors, green and smart corridors, I think. That could be a new term. Between nations.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think this is a question that does come up, the question of the self-regulation. So I think that's a good suggestion. Would anybody else on the panel like to comment on that? We're good? Okay. Do we have another question back there?
Hi, so I'm wondering, the Arctic is a very unique environment. It's also a very extreme environment. So in your opinion, in your experience, what are some of the challenges and opportunities to the green transition in this type of environment? And how do you go about tackling some of those challenges?
Is this for anybody in particular? I guess we can just, anybody who would like to take this on? Yeah.
Sorry to be back again. It is a good question. And going into the Arctic is actually a tough thing. I have been there with ships a lot of times. And it is, you are remote, it's dark during the winter time, and it's remote. And there is obviously also, as mentioned with one of the questions here, is that we are looking, or we see that it will be less multi-year ice in the polar ocean. So it's likely that you will see increased traffic of deep sea crossing the polar oceans in the next years to come. So how are we set up regarding search, rescue operations? How are we set up to handle if ships are drifting off of any type? And you also see there is a race, global race to take positions there. That's also, I believe, one of the reasons for why Trump is interested in Greenland. There you see the big players are here. And I think that will happen. And I think that will be one of the bigger challenges. And if you're looking to the green aspect, then, well, there could be one reason doing that on the green side. It's shorter. So you are actually having a shorter distance. So that is maybe a good thing. But if you're getting in you could say having pollutions in these areas because of some accident, I'm worried about that for sure. And so that is actually happening or likely to happen, I think.
Great, thank you. And without echoing you, is this one on? Yeah. So without echoing you too much, I also think that there's many challenges here in the same sense of the remoteness and especially in terms of infrastructure, having the sufficient fuels and electricity, whatever it may be that you need, search and rescue at the ready, wherever you may be in the Arctic. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And I think one of the things that's so unique is also in the Arctic, the cooperation that we're able to have with each other if we manage to come together. I know it's a little challenging now given Russia and the geopolitical picture as it is now, but I think it's a challenge, not necessarily a problem in terms of the future ahead.
I also like just to add one more comment to this. One thing is the deep sea shipping. But another interesting aspect is what about remote societies in the Arctic? We have Svalbard as one society, but even if in this region, how are we going to deal with the new type of fuels? Do we have fuel security? How are we going to electrify off-grid societies in the Arctic region? That's why I mentioned that we probably have to solve two questions at the same time. One is to do electrification in local communities. That's where I believe in off-grid small plant solutions, where you have a mixture between the sun and wind. And if you are able also to set up a small-scale production of hydrogen or some other types, then you have an energy storage, and which in a way can make the renewables more robust. And if you have gas, well, then gas is the backup, or coal, or whatever. So I think we have to accept that there will be a hybrid solution, and where even some small reduction in CO2 emissions will help.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what the panelists said a couple of comments. So first, yes, the northern route is shorter in distance, but the reality of sailing in that sea makes it still very complicated and a long journey. So not necessarily better when it comes to GHG emission. The second thing I wanted to say is that those vessels that are looking at using these routes are mostly not going to go and provide food, for example, to the communities there. So I don't think it's going to impact positively those communities. They're still going to have to get their food at a very high price coming from the mainland or the capital. And so we're just looking at a use of that region being just, again, from outside people or industries, not benefiting the people that live here, and causing potential very high risks to the environment. So I guess what I would say is be wary of this and try to reduce as much as we can the use of the Arctic for shipping.
Thank you very much. We had another question? Yeah. And then.
Thank you to all the panelists. I guess this is a question mainly to the two shipping people here, but a few times there was quoted a sort of gain in efficiency from adding things like wind power. I guess that was from your presentation. And I wondered what the uncertainty about those kind of estimates are when you take into consideration climate change affecting wind patterns, sea state with reduced sea ice cover, and whether there are times or places that may actually not be the solution or a reduced benefit. If you could speak to that.
you might be better to talk about the wind and climate change. But what I've heard is that climate change, we're talking to actually wind industry, because I had that question, and what they told me is that most likely wind will simply increase. I don't know if that's real or not, but that's what I heard from the industry. And so they seem to not be worried about that and just say, oh, it's just a better case for wind, climate change. Second thing is that talking about, for example, snow accumulation on sails, there is, so all of these technologies proprietary, so it will differ from who is building it or having it. But there's different things that are being looked at. So for example, you can add a heating cell on top of a suction sail, and that would just be using the actual power of the sail. So it's not adding any use of fuel or battery. And so that would melt the snow as it comes in, so not adding any weight to the vessel. And then there is other technologies looking at inclining the sail. So I guess it might change how much it takes on the wind and propel the vessels, but at least you won't have capsizing ships. So wind propulsion is a viable option for the Arctic, but needs to have some sort of modifications, let's say.
Thank you. I want to comment. I don't know more about this. But I mean, what I do know is that we actually have very little observations, especially in the Arctic, and this is just traditionally known, so it's actually more difficult to forecast things like polar lows and such. So as far as the reliability of wind on wind energy, I'm actually not quite sure. I think that's a really good question. But okay.
Yeah, I also wanted to say, a lot of how you use wind is a lot of how it's operated. So it might save you fuels, but it also might gain speed for you. And with the technology they have on weather monitoring and all of that, they can just simply decide to use it or not, the sail.
Great, thank you. We have another question over here. Yep.
Do have an unrelated question and also happen to specialize in observing wind in the Arctic, and our models are just not good enough to constrain that. At best, it's going to be more and more chaotic. But unrelated to that, I don't want to be antagonistic, but I'm curious if you could talk about, we all know that the greenest thing you can do is to reduce these sorts of things, reduce, reuse, recycle, and so on. And I'm curious how that gets discussed in this lens. I admire any effort to take something and make it more green, but the reality is, like the whales, the best we can do is not necessarily ship across the Arctic, and I wanted to give you all an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, it is actually the biggest saving you can do is actually to reduce the shipping, and that is also where they are looking into to figure out what type of trades, what type of do you really need to do, and I think there will be a shift in that, where also new production techniques will in a way change the trades in the world, and also how many ships are going in a very unoptimal manner. They are going in ballasted condition where they are not using, you could say, the capacity when they are going home again. So there's a lot of efforts looking into the different, I would say, shipping patterns in order to improve that. So that is super important. But still, we believe that transportation around the globe will be there. Maybe less, hopefully less, and more efficient, but it still will be significant.
I have this one. So just another little dark and gloomy example from the fisheries sector is that if we look back in the past years, let's say 10, 20, 30 years. There's fewer fishers, there's fewer vessels, but the horsepower has increased and the fuel consumption has increased because the way that we have navigated governance and policies has not been in favor of reducing fuel consumption and being more streamlined. So it's something that we're opening the eyes for now, luckily, but and the mindset is going that way, but it hasn't been. So it's it's a really good topic.
Energy efficiency it's being talked about in the industry and at the IMO level. It's not only a topic from like hippies, NGOs that I might be part of. For example, currently there are negotiations at the IMO about this carbon intensity indicator that takes into account operational energy efficiency, but also design. Now the reality is also that at the same time we are negotiating the levy and the global fuel standard, and that has more traction at the moment. But this has to be, those negotiations about the levy and the global fuel standard have to be decided by March, while the carbon intensity indicator has to be decided before 2026. So that means that even though right now there is more traction on the levy and global fuel standard, we will have time to talk about those things and to try to make energy efficiency for shipping more implemented, I guess. And then on the industry side, I mean, it's saving you so much money when you apply those energy efficiency measures. And when you start talking about those fuels that will cost them 6 times, maybe 7 times more, it's very easy to make the case for reducing speed or having port management being a bit more sensible. So yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like a no measure and like it's not going to happen, but it's already somehow happening. And then you enter into the insurance and the finance and all of that, where having a green vessel is going to be more and more relevant in the future.
One guy in the red shirt there, I can see that he was waving his hand.
Okay. I think you can, yes, we can take the last question.
Oh, honestly, I gave up, so no. No, I'm just kidding. So hi, my name's Kevin. I am from the state of Alaska, and you talked a little bit about this, but this is kind of mainly towards the shipping industry, but to the fishing as well. What is, from what you understand, the plan to invest in those local communities? May it be in the healthcare, may it be in job training, may it be in the infrastructure in the sense of actually maintaining the infrastructure? Because right now in the state of Alaska, we do have a lack of deep water ports and a lack of Arctic ports, and we don't have a lot of infrastructure or even a road system in place to help support that. So what is the plan for the future to invest in our mainly indigenous communities, not just in the state of Alaska, but around the Arctic from the fishing and the shipping industries?
I'm going to start here, and I see there's eager eyes this way, so I'm going to pass it down this way.
So the levy is being negotiated at the IMO. So nothing is set yet, but I will say something. So the Pacific Islands are the one leading on those negotiations, and they're the one with this proposal that is $150 per ton of GHG emissions. That proposal is because it's clear that the transition of the shipping industry is going to drive the costs up for remote communities, for small developing islands, and for LDCs. And so this is seen, the levy, not so much as a way to upscale zero-emission fuels, but to actually make the transition equitable. Now, we don't know yet because it is being negotiated at the moment. So everything about the collection and distribution is being talked about. But the idea for it to be just and equitable would be to have a distribution out of sector, not just in sector. And that enables your ports to have access to this money for the infrastructure, but also for even things that are even more remote to the shipping industry and simply for those communities or those islands to mitigate the overall climate change.
I think we'll let everybody maybe either have a last comment or respond to the question. I would like to give everybody opportunity for this as well.
Okay. No, I think that is also where the government with the local and global actors should collaborate. And for me, so when I'm impatient is that we know that we need to do something regarding emissions, that we don't need more reports. So that's why I'm saying it's actions that are needed. Of course, there are numbers of questions to be solved, but I'm looking now that we have to plan the work and work the plan. And where also I think the government and also in the polar regions, we should collaborate on this. And I have a strong belief in this, what's going on now in IMO, and also in the different, also inside EU, we are curious about what happens in the States now with the new president, but nevertheless, I think Alaska and other states can even though address those topics, so, and also with Canada, so we have to execute now.
I can just use this one.
Again, sorry.
Yeah. So in terms of fisheries, I mean, from my personal experience and what I've seen is that as long as you maintain to keep local ownership of fisheries, the ones that are fishers and contribute in that industry, they do reinvest in their local communities. And they do, whether that be a football court or in the ports, like they continue and to contribute to the economic circulation in those communities. So, and in that sense, I do believe that climate change may open for some possibilities, given that we see that stocks are migrating northwards and also deeper. So potentially, although for the Central Arctic Ocean specifically, we have the fisheries agreement that has a ban on fisheries, but there may be potential to have fishing activities that move that way, and if so, then I believe that those actors will contribute to invest in the communities where they live.
Thank you very much. So I think we've actually had a really good discussion and very good questions, and I really appreciate everybody's participation. Actually, I want to give just opportunity for Gabriella to just, can you just answer, do you think that based on your research, we're anywhere near some kind of figured out who's responsible for any kind of integrated Pan-Arctic strategy, or is it still in early stages? Like more of a collaboration of how we can work together.
Okay, I would say that a lot can be done starting from the EU, and then of course like through the Arctic Council.
Yep.
And definitely there's a need to stress for more collaboration and less on national interests, which right now are, of course, increasing, especially with the opening up of new marine ways in the Arctic. But yeah, so.
Agreed. Yep. We kind of toggle in between as well, the national and international, so I agree. And I want to give a big hand to all the presenters again, and we could go on for so much longer, so please come to the part 2 as well.